Hey ladies, I hope you are doing wonderful on this Tuesday morning. So, last week's episode was I sounded like I was slow. I feel like I was high the whole time. It seemed like I don't do drugs. So this episode, I hope that I am recording it correctly because what do, you guys? We go ahead and start doing things, and even if it's not perfect and you haven't perfected it, you just have to keep going. And that's my thinking anyway. So we'll go with that. And yeah, we're going to start this episode. So this week I thought it was really important for us to actually talk about fear, because like a lot of times we don't think about fear in our daily lives. Although we fear all the time, we don't think about it, and we just go ahead and live through life and not kind of diagnose what our fears are, and we don't talk about our fears. And I think that it is one of those big things that we need to bring to light, and we actually really need to discuss it. So I guess the big thing is like, what do we fear? Like, what is fear? I guess you could say fear is your body's response to something. It could be anything from fear from rejection from a job, fear of rejection from the significant other that you're looking for. Fear could be like a number of things. And the biggest ones are fear of rejection and fear of failure. Everybody feels that if I don't do it, then I don't have to feel fearful of anything, and that's just not the way to think. But those are the two biggest ones. Your fear is going to be your rejection and fear of maybe not being good enough. That's another fear that a lot of people, a lot of women I see all the time, they fear those two things: not being good enough, not being up to the standards that they are held to in the world. The women are supposed to do all these things, and they fear that they can't live up to those things. Fear is the one thing that I see a lot of times with the women that I talk to. Because of fear, it stops them from doing a whole bunch of things in their life. And I can go back to when I was even in high school, or middle school. And I can remember that we were supposed to go, and it was like a field day type thing. You had to race around the track, and you had to do one thing around the track, and obviously you were trying to beat these other girls that were there as well. And I can remember faking that I was hurt because I just feared losing the race. Not that it was supposed to be fun and that it was supposed to be something enjoyable. I mean, heck, field day was like get out of school for a day back then. Obviously now I don't even think it's all day now, but back then it was all day. But I can remember fearing that. And because of that, I faked hurt. I faked that my ankle was hurt or whatever. And I didn't run the race. And still to this day, I mean, gosh, I had to have been 13, 14. And I'm 30 plus years older now, and I still think about that. I always wonder, what if I would have done that? And that's the weird thing about fear. Like, fear will stop you from doing so many things. And not that I regret it, because it wasn't like something that like changed my life forever or anything, me not doing this. But it's something little that I did that I wish now I would have run that race, because I'm like, what? I might have won that race. I never would have known. But anyway, that's just one example of fear, and fear stopping me from doing something. And I know that a lot of people fear different things, as in, starting a business. There's a lot of people that fear starting a business or putting themselves out there. And I'm one of those people because obviously I'm extremely introverted. And here I am talking on a podcast, and I'm doing podcast interviews, and I'm talking to women about child loss, and I'm doing all these things. But if you go back to my roots, I fear everything. Just like that podcast I talked about earlier. I'm like, oh my gosh, I sounded like I was so slow and I was high the whole time, you know? But that's just my fear, and it was my way of trying to stop me from doing this second episode. So where does fear come from? I guess let's break it down to way back then, okay? So fear comes from the caveman days. I'm guessing they had cave women too back then, obviously. But it goes back to the caveman days. Fear was put into us, whatever you believe, fear was put into you to help. Obviously, back then, fear was kind of like the hair on the back of your neck, or just that gut feeling something was wrong. It was placed inside of them to help them from these wild animals and these big things that could kill them back in those days. Well, obviously, as time has gone on, we still have fear inside of us anyway. We still have that fear, and it's not the same as it was back then, but fear does keep us from doing different things. Like, I fear heights, so I know not to get on or jump out of a plane, and I know not to get on some bleachers that are really high because my butt ain't getting down off those bleachers. So I know that that's my fear. But what's my fear there? My fear is my fear of falling, my fear of that parachute not coming out, that fear of me being clumsy like I am on a daily basis and falling off those bleachers in between the little slats because I think that I can fit through them and hurting myself. So that's my fear. But everybody has those fears. And I'm okay with being scared of heights. I'm scared fear, whatever you want to call it. I'm okay with that. But what if I did that in everyday life? What if I let my fears about podcasts, or fears about talking to women about child loss, or talking to women about becoming more than they are, what if I let them stop me from doing what I wanted to do? The unfortunate thing with fear is that fear stops you from doing so many things in life. Fear keeps you from building that business, from starting that podcast, from going for that job, or for speaking out and talking about your ideas and your aspirations for a company or an idea for some kind of business. The sky is the limit with it. Fear stops us from that. But the sad part about it is when fear stops us from doing those things and stops us from talking and using our voice and doing all these different things, it ends up putting regret in our system. If we fear something and we fear it enough where we decide not to do it, later on we have regret, because regret is what replaces fear. So let me break this down for you. So say I fear speaking up about a great business idea for my company. And I've done all the statistics, you've done all the research on it, and you just know it's going to work. But you don't speak up in that meeting where they were trying to get ideas. 6 months down the line, your company, they used somebody's idea that you didn't think was great, but it was what was the best idea at the time, and your company tanks. And you had this good idea, and now you look back at your decision not to talk, and you regret not speaking up. And you might now speak up, and things could go 6 months later down the road, your company could be back where it was, or could be greater than it was. But you'll never know unless you spoke up. But that's where regret comes in. Regret comes in from your response to letting fear take over your body, if that makes sense. So then, because of this regret you're feeling because you should have spoken up or you should have done something, now, then comes the self-pity. Then you're thinking, man, why can't I do this? Why do I fear all this stuff? Why do I do this? And we start downgrading ourselves and we're degrading ourselves, and then that puts our emotions in a spiral, and then some could even get depressed because of it. All because of fear. All because of a fear, because we could not overcome our fear. Now let me tell you, there are some things in life that I will never overcome. I will never overcome my fear of heights. I will never be that person bungee jumping. I will never be that person skydiving. I will never be that person scaling down a wall. I'm not that person, and I never will be. And I'm cool with that. I'm good with that. But I have made the decision that I'm going to probably fear that. Oh, another one is cockroaches. I'll go ahead and throw that out there. Those things are ugly and they fly. But I'm okay with those things. I'm okay with fearing those things. But what I'm not okay with fearing is me not doing something to better myself because of a fear. And I have to deal with that every day of my life. Anybody that says that they have no fear, I haven't met them, because there's always a fear. Maybe they're not afraid to jump out of airplanes, or they're not afraid to speak in meetings, but they might fear relationships and fear the whole attachment thing, or fear not being good enough in a relationship. Because let's face it, everybody in this circle, in this tribe, has felt at one point in time that they weren't good enough for that man or that significant other or that female. You felt it before. So maybe your fear isn't being boisterous. Maybe it's relationship-wise. And the sad part about it is fear is what keeps us from being happy. It's what keeps us from reaching that serenity dream, like we talked about on the last episode. So now that you know what fear leads you to, it leads you to regrets, it leads you to self-confidence issues, it leads you down to possibly depression. What are your fears? What do you see within you that you fear? And the best and quickest way to do it is to write it down. And I write because I am old-fashioned, and I write in a journal. I write down what my fears are. I write down what I'm thinking and how to overcome them. And find out exactly what is triggering you. What is your problem with fear? What is it? What is it? Is it with a relationship? Is it with your job? Is it with doing something entrepreneur-ish? I'll use that word. I think I made that word up. But what is your fear? You have to identify a fear before you can change that fear. Before you can do anything to get past that fear, you have to identify what that fear is. So that's number one. Obviously, identify what is it that stops you from doing what you want to do. When you envision your serenity dream, what is it? Write it down. After you identified it, you're going to be like a 3-year-old toddler. You're going to ask why. Why do you fear it? And it has to be deeper than I fear it because people are going to make fun of me, or I fear it just because. Like, really think about why you fear it. And I can give you an example for this, and hopefully it starts you on the track of figuring out what your fear is. So when I was about to hit publish on my book, when Momma, You Don't Heal was coming out, I had uploaded it. I had uploaded all the graphics, the book spine, and everything in it. And I just sat there looking at my computer. All I had to do was click enter. I say enter. I had to click on my computer to hit submit, to quote publish. There's a lot more steps in it, but you hit publish. And I couldn't do it. I sat there just looking at my computer, looking at the publish button. And just, my fear was that it was going to be rejected, that nobody was going to like it, that everybody was going to think that I was crazy because of the fact that I gave so much raw emotion in there. And maybe other people weren't thinking like I was thinking. And I had worked with so many women. When I broke it down, I had worked with so many women that I knew what I was thinking. They didn't want to talk about it until I started talking about it. And they didn't want to have people believe what I was believing at one time when I was writing it in the book. So I had to step back and go, you know what? I have talked to so many people and I know they're going through the same thing. And I know at first they think that they're not supposed to feel the way they're feeling and that they're bad people for doing it. And I had to look back at what my fear was. And that's what you have to do. And you have to look at the reality of it. Are you fearing it because it's make-believe stuff that you're putting in your head? Or are you fearing it because it's true, actual, factual stuff? And I can tell you right now, without even knowing you, that 99% of the time, it's just made up stuff, what we think of ourselves. It has nothing to do with what other people think of us. And it's hard. And as soon as June, I can't remember exactly when I hit the publish button so they could go through the reviews, but as soon as I hit that publish button, I overcame that fear. But my biggest problem was I was letting what I expected others to think of me overshadow the importance of that book. And obviously, I overcame that because Momma, You Don't Heal, you can get it in several different places now. But I look back at that situation now and I'm like, if I would have not done it, I would totally be regretting it. I would be 3.5 months behind where I am right now in people getting that book in hand. You have to look at the bigger picture. By you overcoming that fear, and by you doing whatever that is that fear is holding you back from doing, what is the outcome to it? For me, my outcome is I have hundreds of other mothers out there that are reading my book and it's helping them. I see it and I'm very humbled daily by the reviews and by people contacting me about the book and how much it helped them. What are you doing? What is your fear that you can overcome today? So number 2, what you're going to do is you're going to dissect whatever that fear is. Are your fears that you're fearing for whatever it is that you fear to do, is it fact or is it just you? Is it something that you have put in your head? Because we got to remember that even if we're not thinking about fear, our subconscious mind is always thinking of it. So if we're not thinking of our fear immediately, like up front in the conscious mind, your fear is still going on in the back of your mind. So always remember that. So number 2, remember we have to dissect what our fear is. Why are you feeling it? Why? Just like that toddler, that 3-year-old toddler. Why? Why do you fear it? So that's number 2. And the last step, number 3, look at the reasons why you're not doing it. Once you figured out, is it fact or is it something you're making up? Then you have to realize, am I doing this because fear is taking over me? Or am I doing this because there is some kind of factual evidence behind the fear and I shouldn't be doing it? And I can tell you 99.9% of the time, it's just the fear that you're putting that stop on you. You're putting the push to move forward. You're stopping it right there. And that's what fear does. That's what fear is meant to do. It's meant to make you think twice before you do something. But in our lives, especially today, it's put in place because of all of this, I say, social media and TV and everything, and all these expectations we're supposed to have for ourselves, and it will drive you nuts if you try to live up to these expectations that everybody puts on you. And God knows half of them contradict each other, so which way do you go, one way or the other way, or which way? So if you have that fear, you know that it's what you're putting in your head. Just hit that publish button. Just open your mouth and talk that one time. And you will never imagine how much opportunities come to you. All you have to do is beat that fear. And I make it sound so easy. Okay, 1, 2, 3, and I'll be fine. But it's one of the hardest things that you have to do. And that's for every single fear you have. Because I guarantee there's not just one fear that you have inside of you. But that's okay. It's good to have fear. It's good not to be fearless. Like my 9-year-old child right now, she is fearless. And it's scary. Kids are fearless. You know why? Because they're not listening to all those voices behind them and all this man-ass stuff that's going on in the world. That's why they're fearless. That's why we fear as women. We fear we're not good enough. We fear so many rejection. We fear relationships. And fear has a way of making you be the person that you don't want to be. Fear, because you're angry with yourself, can make you angry at other people, make you lash out. It can make you do a lot of things that you normally wouldn't do because it messes with your emotions. So I say that to say, push past your fear. Push past that fear because there is nothing stopping you but yourself. And it's, again, easier to say than actually do, but push past your fear today. You know 1, 2, 3, and you know if you get to the point where you're like, this is kind of crazy, hit that publish button. Open that voice and start where your journey, where your Serenity dream starts at. Your Serenity dream, everything you've ever wanted, it might be on the other side of that fear. But I can tell you this, once you move past that first fear, then you move past that second fear, and then you move past that third fear, and once you keep hitting these fears and not letting them take over you as a person, it'll push you further and further and further than you ever thought you could be. It'll push you to where you want to be. But you have to make the decision. You have to make the decision whether you're going to let that fear stop you or whether you're going to let that fear subside. It's all on you. And unfortunately, we like to put things on other people, and we like to say, oh, well, I don't have to make that decision because someone else can make it for me. This is the decision that you have to make. You have to make this decision to move forward in your life. You're amazing anyway. Just by being a woman, you are amazing. You're exceptional. But if you're a woman that can also conquer her fears, and I'm not saying every single one because I told you earlier I'm not conquering 2 of my fears, but if you can conquer your fears, you can be so much more. And I can't stress that enough because fear will make you feel minute. It'll make you feel tiny. It'll make you feel useless. So conquer your fear today. Decide today, you know what, I'm going to try this thing and I'm going to conquer one fear. And then if I conquer that fear, then I'm going to conquer another fear. And then I'm going to conquer another fear. And that way you live with no regret. You live with, okay, I overcame my fear and it turned into this. And even if that fear, say you have a fear of being a voice in your company and actually telling your ideas and your aspirations, I guess, for the company. And I keep using the job, but it could be anything, but that way you know. And maybe that's not the company for you then. Or maybe that guy that you've had a crush on forever, you just want to tell him, or you just want to say, hey, do you want to go out to eat? Go out and get coffee, whatever it is. And you decide to do it. And they say no. What happens when that happens? You take all of that energy that you were feeling for that person and you release it. You release it into the oblivion, into the world, and it opens you up for seeing things differently, seeing people differently, maybe meeting that Mr. Right or Mrs. Right or whatever. It opens you up for that. But you can't be opened up with that if you have this fear. And then let's talk about 20 years down the road where you meet and marry Mr. Wrong because you were waiting for Mr. Right, and you regret it. And you say, I wish I would have said something because I don't know how it would have ended. Or you go to that class reunion and you're like, you know what? I'm talking to this guy now and he acts like he likes me, but I'm married. Or he's married. Or you guys discuss how you both had a crush on each other at one time, but right now it's not the time because your life's changed. And that's another example. It's just, I'll use one for women who have lost children because that's where I come from. I feared not talking, I feared my child being forgotten, but I also feared talking about my child because it hurt other people when I talked about child loss. But what I was doing was I was upsetting myself, and I went to such a dark place during that time. It's just a really, really dark place. And I got depressed because I wanted to talk about my son, but I had fear of talking about my son, of what people would think, what people would say. I had fear of my son being forgotten, but yet I wouldn't even talk about him. And I had to break it down. Are those people really that important to me? If they can't take me talking about my child loss the way that I wanted to talk about my child loss, are those the people that are my people? Or is that my tribe? No, it's not. It's not at all. And I had to realize that. Now that I'm over my fear, I talk about my child, and I know my child will never be forgotten because I'm never going to put him in that box anymore. And it gives me comfort. It gives me joy. It gives me happiness. And it gave me the courage to write that book. And obviously that caused a whole different fear, but it gave me that courage. Moving past your fears gives you courage for the next big thing, whatever that big thing is for you. That big thing for you is going to be different than the big thing for me. And it might be a big thing for you, but to me, it doesn't seem like a big thing. Or it might be a big thing to me, and it doesn't seem like a big thing to you. You set your expectations on what that is. And it doesn't have to be some grand thing like, I'm going to save $1 million, or I'm going to get a brand new vehicle. That shit's expensive. Come on, let's be real there. It doesn't have to be something like that. It might be, I guess in child loss, it might be like today I'm actually going to get up, take a shower, and go to the store, something I haven't done in 2 weeks. Something simple to the everyday person, but for a mom going through child loss, it's something totally different. You decide. You make the choice today. And I guess that's kind of where I wanted to talk about fear. And I think the most important thing when you're dealing with fear and you're going through step 1, 2, and 3, and when you're evaluating yourself and the fear that you have within yourself, be real with yourself. Be real. Be truthful with yourself, because sometimes honesty, it hurts like heck, but it's what we need to hear. It's what we need to think for ourselves. We need to know where we're starting at, and the only way to get over that fear, to get over all these roadblocks in our life, is to evaluate it and be extremely truthful in whatever direction we're going. So that's kind of my talk on fear. And I think fear leads into personalities, and it leads into morals and values, and that's like a whole nother episode that we could go into. But I wanted to end it here. So this week's takeaway is fear and what's stopping you from doing what you want, what's stopping you from reaching your Serenity dream. That's it for today. So if you guys want to hit the subscribe button, the like button, and to get the newest episodes, please do so. I would love to have you subscribe to my podcast. And if you want to support me in any other way, you can go to the serenitydreamer.com, and there is a whole bunch of information on there. Or if you are a mom struggling with child loss, you can join my Facebook group. My Facebook group is at Women Surviving Child Loss, and I can help you that way. Or you can subscribe to my business page, The Serenity Dreamer. I'm easy to be found, and obviously you can always DM me if you have questions, if you have show ideas, if you want to be a guest. I would love to have you. So with that being said, until next week, be safe and be brave, my warriors.